welcome, everybody. Welcome to episode number 5 of listening to every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. Wow. I'm glad that you guys are here. This has been quite the journey thus far. I'm going to go through how much we have watched thus far. I am currently in triple digits, but together we've watched double digits. We have watched 12 videos together from what I recently calculated right before this stream. But I did it. I did calculate it. I said I would, and so I'm glad that I did. But yeah, how are you guys doing today? How has your day been? My day has been pretty good. I just interviewed a guy on the Shroud of Turin. So that episode will be coming out here soon. And it was a pretty fascinating episode, I will say. The Shroud of Turin is definitely a quite an interesting topic. And so I'm pretty excited to get into all of that with you guys coming up. But in terms of where we are at, currently, as I said before, we're in triple digits, 103 videos. We have watched 103 videos. That is about a third of the content to get through, 376 videos in total. And then, as I said before, together we've watched a dozen videos. We make a whole dozen of eggs together. That's just fate. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I'm driving home now, but I'm here. Well, welcome. Thank you for tuning in while driving home. It's a frustrating day. I'm sorry to hear that. Here it's been kind of gloomy. It's been pretty rainy around here, around these parts. And so that's been kind of a bit of an adjustment. We've had a lot of kind of sunny weather. So, every sunny day has an equal and opposite rainy day, proverbial. I'd rather a rainy day, though, than a ton of snow. Who's with me on that? Who would rather a rainy day over a snowy day? I guess it depends on the snow. If the snow is like really fluffy, I feel like that's definitely a pretty good day. So, but today we're talking about free speech and free expression. So Alex O'Connor, the video that we're currently on, is a video discussing free speech. So the next few videos, they're all kind of longer, and I think it's just more fun to watch the shorter ones together. So the one that we'll be watching today is this one here, Ridiculous Protesters Shut Down Speech in Oxford, which, as we discussed earlier, Alex just joined Oxford. So that's kind of a part of the, back lore behind all of this is that Alex O'Connor just joined Oxford by this point in his YouTube career. And so now he's speaking up about it and speaking up about some of the issues that come along with doing that. Yes, I hate shoveling snow. Oh my gosh. It's it gets kind of frustrating. Shoveling snow is annoying, that's for sure. So we'll be watching that video, and then after that, he has another kind of video discussing free expression. So that should be another interesting one. I think it's just so ironic too. I sent out a message about this earlier, but this stream was supposed to be on Tuesday, right? These streams are happening every single Tuesday, 7:30. This week, I couldn't because I had to work late, and I was a little bit frustrated. But when I thought back about it, it's kind of ironic, It's like my job's like trying to silence me. It's trying to keep me from from streaming. But I will not be silenced, right? Just change. It didn't have anything to do with the live stream, obviously, but it just so happened to be on the live stream where I was talking about free speech. So very, very ironic. So. Welcome everybody who's just tuning in. I went over the numbers. I'll go over them again real quick before we get into the videos. Currently, we are at 103 videos watched altogether. And along through these live streams, what we have watched are 12 videos. So we've definitely, gotten pretty far. We're about a third of the way through. and we're just going to keep chugging along. I'm very excited to get into the content for today. I honestly have no idea what this video is going to exactly talk about, but I am excited. I like the idea of free speech, and I think it's really important too, especially with what's going on here in the United States in terms of free speech. I mean, we had the shooting recently with Charlie Kirk, which is a tragedy. It's very sad that he has been killed for most likely political reasons. And while I personally did not fully agree with a lot of what Charlie Kirk had to say, he should not have had to deal with that. Like, he did not deserve to be killed for speaking out, for having conversations with the other side. Like, this is the kind of stuff that we need as a society, is to push back and to have people critique one another and to have ideas tested and to have debates, to have things like that. Like, this is what a part of this what this channel is about. And so my heart goes out to Charlie Kirk. My heart goes out to like his family and a lot of the people that knew him well. I hope that we can let this sort of bring us together as a country here in the United States. And part of that starts with talking about free speech. It talks about, having that free expression where we can discuss ideas in order to get to the bottom of truth or get to the bottom of what works for us, right? And that, I think, is the essence of free speech. It's the beauty of it. Free speech does not mean that you can say whatever you want without consequences. There are certain languages, I've said this before in another live stream, there are certain types of language that are illegal. Like, you can't express certain things, like, for instance, copyright. Like, if you express something that someone else has ownership of, then obviously you can't personally express it. They are the ones to express it, and you need to have their permission in order to express it, right? Things like libel, and obscenity, like these are expressed things that we don't want to propagate in society because it would be very bad. But generally, the idea is we should do as much as we can to protect free speech, free expression, and anyone who gets in the way of that through physical harm and killing someone, like with Charlie Kirk, like, that is very sad and very tragic. So my heart goes out to him, goes out to his family, and just all of that. So, but let me know in the chat, what do you like most about free speech? What is your favorite part in terms of free speech? And when, I guess, in your life, if you've ever had like a story or a moment when your free speech was maybe contested and you were able to stand your ground and hold to that. If any of you have any stories along those lines, feel free to put that in the chat below. So, without further ado, I say let's get into the very first episode. This one, as I said before, ridiculous protesters shut down speech in Oxford, with Steve Bannon. Or talking about Steve Bannon. I'm not sure exactly what to expect from this video, so we're learning together. So here we go.
Robinson and ASAP Rocky. So I haven't said this in a video yet, and so to both fill in any subscribers and also explain my absence from uploading recently, in November I matriculated as a student at Oxford University, so I've been busy studying philosophy and religion. If you hear any noise in the background, by the way, or think that I'm talking more quietly than usual, it's because I'm in university accommodation. Studying at Oxford affords innumerable privileges, and not least among these is the eligibility to become a member of the Oxford Union, one of England's oldest and most respected debating societies. It hosts individual talks and also debates from and between an incredibly wide range of influential people. Past guests have included Malcolm X, Bernie Sanders, Mark Hamill, Jeremy Corbyn, Tommy Robinson, and ASAP Rocky. Now, it's not uncommon for a speaker to be invited who isn't most welcomed by the students of Oxford. Of course, this is in large part why the union exists in the first place. And last week it hosted Steve Bannon, former executive chairman of Breitbart News and former chief strategist to Donald Trump, of course. And no prizes for guessing how students in a fairly liberal city like Oxford reacted to this invitation. Immediately after this event was announced, there was quickly organised a protest to take place outside of the Oxford Union. Now, for myself, in situations where speakers I abhor are putting themselves in front of an audience, my favourite place to be, always, is in the room. It troubles me not at all that many people prefer to take part in a protest like the one being organised instead and voice opposition from the outside, usually gaining more public attention by doing so anyway. Fair enough. I do love a good protest. I was quite excited to go and see Bannon and to see the protesters and, of course, to see the fiery debates that would inevitably ensue. But when I got there, I quickly realised that that wasn't happening. Protesters of Bannon had shown up in their hundreds and set up a blockade, physically preventing anybody from entering and, I presume, also leaving the Union. I'm aware that this kind of protest happens all the time, especially in the US, for speakers like Ben Shapiro at Berkeley and the like. But I'd never experienced one in person before, and after realising that I wasn't getting in, I decided to pull out my phone and start live streaming, basically interviewing anybody that I could, which you can now see on my channel, of course. But it really gave me some time to think about it and to talk to many people of varied opinions about protesting and free speech, and I've spent a lot of time considering whether it's acceptable to do what these protesters were doing. Overall,
I'm curious, we'll get back to that video in just a moment, but I'm curious as to what the live stream is. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. He said he live stream. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So this is what he's talking about.
There's an east side entrance.
The side entrance is a block 2. Oh, we're live.
No, there's an east entrance. There's 3 entrances.
3 entrances. Is there one on the other side? I don't know. Okay, we're currently stood outside the Oxford Union, where Steve Bannon has been invited to give a talk. And didn't quite expect this many people, but I thought I'd just document what's going on. Let me see if I can work this out.
I don't want. That's why I'm going to the burritos. Once it comes, that's what happens.
So crowded in there. It kind of reminds me of I was in India, and it was always very crowded, and especially in Mumbai. So, except they I mean, they weren't protesting like this, so that gives another level of intense energy to it. He has his rights, but so do we. Don't sanction white supremacy. Hey, it rhymes. Has a bit of a rhyme to it.
Whatever that means.
Let's see where's the, is it to the
Someone
interview?
they want to close down free speech.
No, they want to what's your opinion on that? What's your
Here we go.
Bannon's not a fascist, he's a laissez-faire liberal. This lot don't know anything about politics.
Wait,
He's a laissez-faire liberal.
laissez-faire liberal.
Of course he is. You know his economic views.
Yeah, I know his economic views.
He's a
Almost
liberal.
autarky, aren't they? Which is a bit
The
fascist.
trouble is, this lot don't know anything about politics. It's stupid. Have you
That's the
noticed?
generalisation, I think.
Have you
isn't it?
noticed the fascist behaviour? I try to express an opinion. All they can do is shout to the megaphone. They want to close down free speech.
No, they want to
what's your opinion on that? What's your
He's
opinion?
not a fascist.
What's your opinion? What's your opinion?
Well, I don't support Bannon. If he's not a fascist, he's a laissez-faire liberal.
He talks about
Do you guys know who Shannon Bannon is? I'm not sure who that is. I'll look him up real quick, but if you know, feel free to put it in the chat.
Julius Ebola.
Well,
He talks about
Oswald,
Julius
that's what I was
Ebola.
for. Oswald Mosley.
Do you think- I'd be freaking out just by how many people do it. It's crazy.
But also,
people here care more
Oswald
about
Corbyn.
mainstream
political elections
should disallow him from speaking at the
Because
Oxford
Oswald
Union.
Mosley is
people here are arguing about whether he's socially conservative, and he's incredibly
Sure, so-
conservative to the extent that some
How do you feel about the fact then that this protest is currently preventing a few hundred people from getting in to listen to him? Are you happy about that, or would you say that's a problem? Would you be happy to, for instance, stand on the sideline of protest and let people go in? Or do you like the fact...
That's why people have written this.
I appreciate that, but what do you think about what's going on just a few meters over there, where people aren't able to get into the union because of the protests? How do you feel about that?
We've got a free country, so we're lucky.
Don't overgeneralize.
I wish I could hear the interviewees a little bit better. But yeah, that's fascinating. So it's live. So here, this is Steve Bannon here. So he's the guy that's they're protesting against being shared, right? So I'll read this here quick. Stephen Kevin Bannon, born November 27th, 1953, is an American media executive, political strategist, pundit, and former investment banker. He served as the White House's chief strategist for the first 7 months of President Donald Trump's first administration, before Trump fired him. He is a former executive chairman of Breitbart News. Never heard of that. Since 2019, Bannon has hosted the War Room podcast. Oh, there's so much lore here. Oh my gosh, I could go down a rabbit hole right here. Just click that link. Click that link, and I'm down a rabbit hole. Bannon was an officer in the United States Navy between 1977 and 1983 and worked for 2 years at Goldman Sachs as an investment banker. In 1993, he became acting director of the research project Bisphere 2. He was an executive producer on 18 Hollywood films from 1991 to 2016. In 2007, he co-authored Breitbart News, a website which he described in 2016 as the platform for the alt-right. Okay, so he's an alt-right kind of guy. So that's interesting. Is there anything? Okay, in 2016, Bannon became the chief executive officer of Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and was appointed chief strategist and senior counselor to the president following Trump's election. Okay, I think this is like 2018. After his criticism of Trump's children was reported to Michael Wolff's book Fire and Fury, he was disavowed by Trump and left Breitbart. Okay, so that's a bit about Shannon, or sorry, where did I get Shannon? Steve Bannon. I just mixed his name. Steve Bannon, Shannon. Oh, that's funny. So that seems to be who that guy is. So that's fun. And that's who they're protesting. The Trump administration does get a lot of conflict. So that makes sense. That adds up. But yeah, we'll get back to the video here. But that's kind of shocking to see that kind of going on. I'm in the wrong spot. Here we go. Yeah. Steve Bannon. Let's just call him Shannon, makes his name. Steve Bannon, Shannon. Yeah. I guess when was this video? Because it was probably around the time that he...
Imagine being
around the time that he, Sorry, that thing was playing and I have a hard time speaking while the thing is playing in my ears. Yeah, so this was right around the time that he would have been fired. So this was, 6 years ago? So 2018, yeah, November 2018. So I wonder if this was before he got fired or after he got fired from the Trump administration. That's interesting. We'll see his take on things. He'll probably elaborate, but yeah, that's who Steve Bannon is.
And the position that I want to share with you here is this. The protesters blocking entrances to the Union and physically preventing movement in a public space should be ashamed of themselves. I want to explain why I think this form of protest is not acceptable, and also that criticizing this is not criticizing the right to protest altogether. There's an increasingly common debate surrounding the right to shut down controversial speakers, as the common terminology goes, and it's something that we should be very, very careful about. It's not something that I've really spoken on before, so consider this my contribution. Now, there's no doubt in my mind, of course, that there were a great many protesters who weren't blocking any entrances at the Union, although they did largely unintentionally have this effect. But I can only wish them more power. I'm grateful that people are willing to publicly defend their views and challenge what they perceive to be evil without holding back. That's great. But I've also seen a whole lot of apology for those who were blocking entrances. There's this straw man being pestilentially spread around the university, that those who are angry with the people who were blocking entrances to the Union are somehow challenging their right to protest. They seem to think that the right to voice opposition to a speaker is one and the same with the right to prevent that speaker from being heard at all. I see this more and more, and it's more and more worrying every time, especially because this isn't any longer the activity of some negligible minority. To take an archetypal example from a Facebook page that
This actually reminds me of something about Jordan Peterson. He used to have his protests he used to be protested quite frequently whenever he would do like a speech or anything along those lines. And that kept happening until he decided to host his events in the morning. That's how that's how he ended the protests. Is instead of hosting it at a time that a lot of people could show up and protest him, he decided, you know what, let's protest this thing in the morning, or let's host this thing in the morning. And you know what, the protesters didn't show up. They didn't want to wake up. They cared about the cause, but not enough to wake up at 6 a.m. Not enough for to grab that morning cup of coffee in order to sit through the speech and protest it. So that's how he fixed the problem. It's definitely an interesting way of getting around the problem, but definitely I like that aspect of it. If you ever want to protest someone, make sure to be there for the morning, evening, middle of the night, whatever it may be, or don't, if you're getting protested, maybe just host it in the morning and have some Krispy Kreme donuts for any protesters that show up and say, good job. You know what? Good job. You deserve to protest me because you're showing up. Yeah.
allows Oxford students to anonymously post their grievances for other students to see. Here's someone, whilst in no uncertain terms supporting the right to protest, complaining about people blocking entry to the union, which they see as unacceptable. And the response comes, the sense of entitlement in believing that you should have the right to go legitimize a fascist without opposition is staggering. Who's preventing opposition here? I spoke to a vast and varied number of people, and not one of them expressed an opinion that there should be no opposition to Bannon or no opposition to the union. It's a blatant misrepresentation to claim that people who have a problem with blocking movement in a public space and entry to an event have a problem with protest or opposition in general. And not knowing if this is done purposefully, I have to be either astounded at the inability to distinguish between the two, or disgusted that anybody would intentionally fabricate such a conflation.
Oh my gosh, I just realized. Thank you for whoever. Thank you for sending that chat. I just realized I was muted. Uh, what I was saying is that this topic of what he's talking about, how we sort of equate things together. He was talking about how the protesters at the thing were basically saying. Can I check my audio? Is my audio working now? It should be. It says that it's working now, so maybe that's just delayed. I know there's like a few second latency. So anyway, I'll just keep talking. You let me know if it is or isn't working. It says that it's working on my end. So anyway, what I was saying is it's so interesting how Charlie Kirk right now, his assassination, I find it to be terrible, right? But there's people out there who are saying that just because Charlie Kirk was, killed, that automatically means you can't critique him. That means that you can't say anything. Yeah, thanks for the thumbs up. You can't say anything that's like wrong against him, right? And I just that's ridiculous. Like you can say that some of the things he was saying was not kosher. It was kind of messed up sometimes, but that doesn't mean that he deserves to be killed or anything like that. Like that's so messed up. You can't equate those two ideas. Like there's a difference between critiquing someone and killing someone. And so similar here, we see that there's a difference between protesting someone from speaking on campus and blocking them and stopping them from speaking on campus, right? Like I'm all for Charlie Kirk going out and speaking. I'm all for Steve Bannon going out and speaking, right? Go ahead, do it. But if you're against what they say, you can protest, you can, tell people to not show up, whatever. But the moment that you step on free expression, that's the moment that you go too far. And with Charlie Kirk, it's even more extreme. The moment that you decide to kill someone to stop them from speaking, that's way too far. Way, way, way too far. And I think we can honestly, we can just see that critiquing someone versus killing someone, or critiquing someone and stopping them from speaking, are two totally different things. Way, way different things. So, it's interesting. We have the same problem today, and I just, it's kind of sad to see that we haven't quite learned that. At least some people haven't quite learned that. But we got to advocate for free expression, and that includes critiquing people. That includes saying, you know what? I don't think they were right on everything. I don't think they were a hero, or I don't think blah, 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 blah. That's a good thing. Because even if someone is saying something you disagree with, the fact that they're talking and you're learning a different perspective is good for you. It's very good for you. So, yeah, no, it's crazy.
I'm appalled, as someone who prides myself on my willingness to hold fast to freedom of speech regardless of who's benefiting from it, that someone would think that I'm somehow against protesting or against opposition because I'm not in favor of preventing the movement of people. Don't think for 1 minute that by opposing the idea that a group of would-be authoritarians should be able to block the entrance to events that make them uncomfortable, and in the process, by the way, also block completely unrelated students just trying to get into their accommodation and their libraries and their bars having nothing to do with the event, which is absurd, that the right to protest is being impinged. It's not. Where does the original poster say that there should be no opposition? Does he not open his post with a throat clearing expressing support?
Yeah, he says, I fully support the use of peaceful protest. However, I do take issue with protesters preventing people from attending the event. The sense of entitlement in dictating which events people may or may not attend is unreal. And then going on to also block the entrance is an accommodation block next door to the union is just so ridiculous. Grow up. And then I think the comment below it, let me see. I can't quite read the comment below, but I think what he's responding to is the comment below it. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like this comment is what he agrees with, though, so I don't know exactly what he's talking about.
Support for the right to do exactly this. If you can't see the difference between protesting and setting up a human embargo, or think it's a difference without a distinction, then I really can't help you. If someone like, say, Anjem Chowdhury, who I'm far more acquainted with than Steve Bannon, was speaking at the Oxford Union, as he's been invited to do previously, in fact, I might well be found outside trying to let people know just how despicable a human being he is. But if I saw anybody, even from whatever group I found myself with, trying to block entrance to the event, I'd consider it my duty, since the whole reason I'm there in the first place is to condemn him for his affronts to individual freedom, to make it unequivocally clear that such a person is not on my side and does not have my support. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to protest a man's views and perhaps an institution's platforming of him, not to enforce an event's dissolution. There's a word for that kind of behaviour, and it's not liberalism. To be clear, protests are necessary and delightful and engaging and headline-making and incredibly useful. I encourage you to take part in them as much as you possibly can wherever you see injustice. But don't call yourself a liberal if you won't allow dissent from your condemnation. Don't expect me to be quite so enthusiastic about your decision to enforce your ideas through suppression. I won't stand for it, and one important reason why I won't stand for it is that now, because of this controversy, far more attention has been given to Steve Bannon's views, and specifically his talk at the Oxford Union, than ever should have been. The event was filmed and posted.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And the thing is, if you are out there like protesting, or out there trying to stop speech, like generally that's going to backfire on you. It's a very serious situation what's going on with Charlie Kirk right now. And honestly, when I look at it, what the person did when they, murdered him is they created a martyr. They created a hero, like who's one of the most well-known people in history? Well, Jesus Christ. Who's another really well-known person in history? Oh, Abraham Lincoln. Who's another really well-known president? John F. Kennedy. Like all of these people were assassinated for religious or political reasons, and their names are well known. Their names are known throughout so many historical books. So much is known about them, and I think a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were killed for what they believed in, right? Joseph Smith, he was killed, right? I don't know if it was for what he believed in, but it was partly because he was at least acting politically, and he was killed for it. There's so many times that people who, are martyred for what they do end up becoming better known and more of a figure because they were killed in the act. And there's a dark way of interpreting this that comes to mind from Batman, where he says you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So I don't know if I want to go that route in saying it, but there's a certain sense of truth to that, which is this idea that, you are making a martyr. You are making a hero for people to look up to by killing them. And, they'd have to be a hero prior to that. And now you're killing them and making them even bigger. Because someone can say a whole lot of things about someone who's not alive, right? If someone isn't alive, you can spew a whole lot of things about them. And you can't say anything against that because they're not currently living, in order to test whether their character or whether their deeds are living up to that standard that you are currently propagating or currently talking about. Whereas if someone's alive, then, you can test that standard and you can be more critical of that standard. So it's definitely an interesting issue here. And, with Steve Bannon, it's so crazy, the connections between, obviously what's going on right now is a lot more intense, but, the connections between Steve Bannon, and the protest at Oxford versus, what's going on with Charlie Kirk right now and the his movement, like it's very similar, very similar.
To YouTube, it's not like anyone stopped him from being heard. All they've done is make people who agree with Bannon feel legitimized in their discontent for the protesters and their views, and encourage people who would otherwise agree with them and be a valuable asset to their protests run a mile and reconsider their decision to be on the side of Bannon's opposition. These people are standing on their own tail, and it's going to hurt like hell when they notice. But aside from just blockading an event, which is fairly inherently reprehensible, there were also some confused and ridiculous things being chanted. One of my favourites was the chant, "Who protects Nazis? Police protect Nazis." This one was inescapable. The views expressed by the protesters were that by protecting Steve Bannon from the mob, the police were facilitating fascism and white supremacy. The police, of course, were protecting everyone. Everyone. Do you really think that the men and women who want nothing more than to just finish their shift and go home care in the slightest about your political views? They're there to prevent violence wherever it comes from. They're also there to uphold the law, of course, including freedom of speech. And that's everyone's speech. Yes, even a Nazi's, because what is the law if it's not indiscriminate? If a real Nazi were knocked out at a
I mean, there are moments when there's like over policing and there's racially charged policing. That does happen, and we have statistics to back it up. But in terms of does every police officer are they against free speech? Are they against you protesting? Are they against you because you're a person of color? Like, no, that's so not true. It is a thing though, but yeah, I agree with the sentiment here.
protest and went to a UK hospital, he would receive medical treatment. A doctor's job is to prolong health. Anyone's health. When a Nazi is hospitalized, how stupid would someone look to claim that the NHS is somehow facilitating the rise of fascism? It really doesn't take much thought to see right through this fatuity. Now, to avoid making this video too long, I won't discuss in any more detail what I think of the idea of police protecting the rights of Nazis, but I'll happily write a blog post or something if any of you want me to. Just let me know in the comments. But here's an interesting thought. I was quite offended by this chant and its implications. So to the protesters, what if I am offended by your chant? What if I said that suggesting that Oxford's police is fascistic waters down fascism and in turn helps to facilitate its actual rise more unnoticeably and so is incredibly dangerous speech? Whether I was right or wrong about this, what if I had a group of people surround you and not let you move or get near the police and not let your protest be heard? Remember, the biggest argument against the people who criticised the protesters was that they somehow didn't respect the right of Bannon's opposition to protest. So if I were to physically prevent people from hearing what you had to say, would you be okay with that because you respect my right to protest? Of course you wouldn't, and you'd be right to feel that way. It's one thing to say, I don't like your chants, so I'm going to chant back. It's another thing entirely to say, I don't like your chants, so no one's allowed to hear them. Likewise, it's one thing to say, I don't like Steve Bannon, so I'm going to protest. It's another thing entirely to say, I don't like Steve Bannon, so you're not allowed to hear him. Just who do you think you are? How patronizing and offensive to suggest that I'm not capable of recognizing contemptible speech when I hear it. I don't need you to tell me that Steve Bannon has bad ideas. I don't need you to tell me that I should oppose his platform or his message. And I certainly don't need you suggesting that listening to someone is somehow an endorsement of them. But if that is what you want to say, then go ahead and say it. Because the difference...
That's interesting. One thing that made me think of right away was kind of the YouTube algorithm. I feel like a lot of the time, the YouTube algorithm, it favors things that people want to watch, but sometimes it will disfavor certain videos based upon the content, based upon what they talk about. And I just, that's an interesting one because, you might say, well, YouTube's a private company. I'm just kind of like, well, yes, but they're also basically the only video streaming platform like it. There's other ones that exist, but basically everyone's on YouTube. No one's on a lot of these other platforms. So in that sense, I would say, in a sense, you're blocking someone from sharing thoughts and opinions, not based upon, obscenity, not based on, because it's not necessarily like obscene. It's not threatening language. It's not, libel. It's not any of these things. But it is speech that's maybe controversial. It's speech that is against YouTube's guidelines. And, in one sense, they have a right to, say, we don't want this kind of language on our platform, but it's another thing to consider, well, YouTube's also a very big platform. So in a sense, it's a public sector. It's like a public place. It's just that big. And so can we really say that it's okay to silence people for for protected language on YouTube? I don't know. It's an interesting one.
The difference between you and me is that whilst I find your words incredibly insulting and offensive, I don't claim the warrant to block them from being heard. The only reason why someone would consider trying to block your speech, as far as I can see, is if they're so insecure about their own that they can't bear to have it publicly challenged. Have some courage in your convictions. The reason I'm okay with allowing you to say contemptible things about the police force that's protecting all of us is that I can quite easily hold my opposition to you without having to prevent people from hearing your side of the argument. Your argument fails at the moment of its presentation, and I'm willing to let fellow liberals recognize this for themselves. I might be quite scared by what you have to say, but I'm not scared of you saying it. I want you to say it. It's demonstrably the most effective way to make it crumble. To be clear, this has nothing to do with whether or not the union should have given a platform to Bannon. I fundamentally support free speech, of course, but that doesn't mean that a private institution can't choose to deplatform whomever it likes. That's their choice, that's their right. But they did decide to give him a platform. And look how when he walked into the chamber, there was some slow clapping along with some boos and hisses. Not the most welcoming of entrances. People weren't there to legitimize him, they were there to look him in the eye. When the union invited Little Mix to speak this term, that wasn't an endorsement of pop music, it was a recognition of its cultural significance. And say what you want about Steve Bannon, but you can't seriously argue that he isn't culturally significant. I respect the union's right to platform whomever they like, and I respect the right of its members to protest such decisions, as many of them did. But if a private institution decides to host a free human being to speak on any issue with any level of fervency, it's their prerogative, just as it's your prerogative to decide whether or not to attend, or whether to protest or counter-protest. The moment any of these rights is taken away, that is, the rights of Bannon, the union, the protesters, the counter-protesters, whoever, we're in seriously dicey territory, and it would do us all well to give it some serious thought. You may be absolutely right. Maybe the speaker who's at the union tonight, whomever it may be, is a fascist, or a communist, or a nationalist, or a fundamentalist, or a laissez-faire liberal, or a moderate conservative. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that if you think any of these things, more power to you. Congratulations for having an opinion. Show up and demonstrate your absolute and fundamental opposition to every word that comes out of that speaker's mouth if you like. But don't expect to be applauded by those who don't agree with your diagnosis. And for God's sake, don't antagonize those who completely agree with you, but just want to express their disapproval from inside the chamber and in front of the speaker instead of from the street. This speaker may be, say, a fascist, but don't you dare imply that I don't have the agency to work that out for myself. You're not the arbiter of acceptable speech. Neither am I, neither is the Oxford Union, and neither is the government or the police. And thank goodness this is the case. Please, I implore you, shout as loudly as you can for those things that you choose to believe in. Shout them directly at a speaker as he enters an event, and fill up a street with people to demonstrate solidarity. But just don't claim to be a liberal if you don't also uphold a person's right to walk past your protest and into the chamber and listen to what they have to say. Oxfest, the Facebook page where all of these arguments are kicking off, is anonymous, leading to fairly empty debate and ease of retreat. So here's a face to an opinion, and I will happily discuss it with anyone who isn't scared to death by my disagreement with them. Any students of Oxford who were at the protest, anyone who saw about it online, if you think I'm wrong on this, as if I haven't made this obvious enough already, I encourage and anticipate you to challenge me. But if you prefer, you can just ignore me and not listen to me. You don't have to. And isn't that liberty just so precious? I've been Alex O'Connor. You can follow me on social media here. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Have a very nice day. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's see. What are some of the comments that are going on here? So for any of you who are just tuning in, I put a comment on every single video. We're watching every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. And after watching every video, we come up with a unique comment. So the unique comment has to be something, on topic, something that shows that we watched the video. And I think for this case, I'm thinking something along the lines of how relevant this video is today to a lot of what's going on in the political sphere. But I kind of want to see if anyone can test it out. And anyone get like, Alex, you're wrong, and this is why. I'm curious. This guy says, hang on, where people stopped getting to the bar? Bastards. Yeah, how dare you stop me from a drink? What the hell, man? This young man shows maturity way beyond his years. I'm in university accommodation. Bottles of booze in the background. Yep, definitely a student dorm, all right. Yeah, I mean, I'm currently in the U.S. We had a dry campus, so and I was an RA too when I was in college. So basically I was like, hey, if you have a drink, just don't tell me about it. don't show it to me, because if you do, I'm going to have to write a really long, and I say a really long report on it. And I'm going to have to call, campus housing and go through a long process talking about exactly what happened, detail by detail. And I'm going to not enjoy that at all. And you're not going to enjoy getting in trouble. So either don't drink or just make sure you don't show it to me, because once you show it to me, I have to report it. I just remember that was brutal. I was a bit of I guess I was the registered narc on campus. Claim logical, non-superficial thought process and reasoning. We need more of you. Best wishes to your studies and keep doing what you're doing. Oh yeah. For God's sake, he says, checkmate. Professor, Alex knows God is real. Oh my gosh, I read that wrong. Proof Alex knows God is real. What? God, for God's sake, he says, checkmate. I don't know what that's referring to. Okay. I don't understand the joke, but good job. I hope I never find myself in a position. Okay, I want to see, does anyone contest him? Got a PragerU ad before this. LOL. Oh my god. Let's see. This guy says, finally a sane opinion on the subject. I feel like everyone's just agreeing with him. Let's see. I like this sentiment. Glad to hear your opinion on the matter. Our generation is slowly losing the ability to debate because of incidents like this, and I believe it is an important skill to have so that silencing the opposing side doesn't become the only option we have left. I agree. I very much so agree. Man, I don't see... I don't see it. No one is... Yeah, no, this guy is just kind of saying the same thing. Honestly, it doesn't sound like anyone is disagreeing. I'm sad. I want to see that guy. I want to see that guy who just disagrees with Alex O'Connor. It'd be beautiful. Then we can see what he has to say and have a bit of fun. But all right, well, as always, it is comment time. Time to leave a comment, and as usual, I will start with my little preamble over here. I'm thinking we leave a comment along the lines of kind of how this is so similar to what's going on. For those who are just tuning in, we just watched a video of Alex O'Connor talking about free speech. And it's a video he deems ridiculous. Protesters shut down free speech in Oxford, feat Steve Bannon. So basically, Steve Bannon, he's a person who was on Trump's first administration. He was actually fired in 2018. And he came to speak at Oxford. And in the midst of him trying to speak, there were protesters at Oxford stopping him, getting in the way of him speaking. And so I think it's so interesting how, free speech is attacked so often. And this is so similar. Like, I feel like we haven't even learned from something like this to this day. We're still trying to stop free speech. We're still trying to stop people. And there's a lot of that going on, especially when it comes to what's going on with Charlie Kirk. And I just think the more that we demonize the other side, the more that we, stop the other side, especially from speaking, the less we're going to learn, the less that we're going to actually come to a conclusion about anything. So now it's time to leave a comment on this video. I'm thinking I'll leave a comment along the lines of just how connected this is to Charlie Kirk. So it amazes me. It amazes me how similar this situation is to what is currently going on in 2025. I think that's what I'll say. For context, we just experienced For context, we just experienced the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk because of political expression. What else? Okay. This is the final one. Let me know if you guys have any sort of comment or anything that you'd like to add to the comment at all. And I will definitely do so. But so far I have, hey, Alex, this is Jackson from the Truth and Tradition podcast. I am on a mission to watch every one of your videos and leave a comment on each and every one of them. It amazes me how similar what is going on in this video is to what is currently happening in 2025. For context, we just experienced the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, who was killed because of political expression. We have people shutting others down because they critique what Charlie has to say post-mortem. We also have people like the murderer who decided to kill Kirk for his beliefs. Such a tragedy. I guess we have not learned our lesson. Great video. Keep it up. Yeah, I think that's a good sentiment of definitely what's going on. I'll be honest. It's tough. It's a tough headspace sometimes, especially with what's going on with the political division and everything. So, yeah. I mean, if any of you guys are struggling out there, feel free to reach out, and I, hopefully I can give a word of encouragement in these times. I just think that the political division that's going on is really sad. It's really sad to see. And I'm sure it's just like 1% of the population. It's probably not the majority, but it's what's happening. And so it is definitely pretty hard to see. So, well, I think I'm going to leave this comment, and if I don't hear anything else from you guys, if you guys want to add to the comment, you can. But I think I'm going to leave this comment and we will move on to the next video. If you want to add, I can always edit it. So just let me know. Put it in the comments and we'll come back and we'll edit it. So, but that marks, let me copy that too. I'm keeping track of every single one of these too. So that gets us to, I believe, 105. Is that right? 105 videos? Woo! We have gotten, 104. I lied. We're at 104 videos. 104. We'll be at 105 after this next one. Together, we have listened to 13 videos. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it, but hey, eventually it's going to get in the hundreds, and eventually you're going to be proud of yourself. You're going to be proud that you were here. So make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to give this video, this live stream a like. It really helps with getting more people to view this and be a part of this journey along with me of watching every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. Crazy journey. For any of you who are wondering why I'm doing this too, I'm doing this because I reached out to Alex and I didn't get an answer from him. And so I'm hoping that in watching every single one of his videos and putting together a video kind of talking about the experience, which will take probably about a year, I will be able to, get his attention and maybe I'll get him on as a guest. So I reached out to him. He did respond. He basically just said he was not available, which is totally fine. I'm a small channel, totally get it. So I figured I'd do him this favor. I'd give him this kind of crazy video idea, and maybe that'll get his attention. We'll see. But at the end of the day, I think it's just a lot of fun. It's a cool thing to be able to say that you've done. And the fact that y'all are here with me, represent. Good job. I'm so proud of you guys. So that is that video. Now we move on to the next one, which is it's also on free speech. It's about free expression specifically. So it's a bit of a broader topic to free speech. So let's see. Man, the more videos we watch, the more I have to scroll. Kind of crazy. All right. So this is the last one we watched. It was Ridiculous Protesters Shut Down Speech in Oxford with Steve Bannon. Now we watch Free Speech, a letter to my parliamentary representative, which is cool. This is the second time he's done this. He's actually did a video letter to Parliament once before when he was talking and protesting against this act that would cause certain religious ideas and religion, basically religious ideas to be taught in schools. He was like, you know what? I grew up in a Catholic school and a lot of it was just total BS. So I'm not okay with people talking about that. I'm not okay with that. So that was his first kind of parliamentary critique. So this is another one that's going on. He's got the Rode NT1 mic hooked up, that's a nice mic right there. He's got it pulled up a little weird. It's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be vertical. But yeah, sorry, I'm critiquing his mic. But yeah, sorry. Anyway, let's get into it. Free expression. I'm critiquing his free expression of using the mic that way. Here we go.
Well, hello everybody. Sorry again that it's been such a long time since I last uploaded, and sorry about the camera quality here. One of the reasons that I haven't been uploading, most of you will know that I'm currently getting stuck into my studies at Oxford, but one of the reasons is that I just don't have the time. So I found a little bit of time here before I go out this evening where I could have something to say, but I'll need to just use my webcam and put something very quickly together. I won't count this as a Patreon video or anything of that sort because I recognize the lower quality than usual, but it's an important issue. You'll remember if you've seen my past video that the last time I spoke to you was in reference to free speech and specifically Steve Bannon's invitation to speak at the Oxford Union. Now, I'm not a stranger to speaking about the same issue more than once in a row, as you'll know if you've followed my discourse on philosophy of religion and God. But if you're beginning to tire of talking about free speech, maybe twice in a row might be too much for you. Believe me, I'm getting bored of this too, but it's an incredibly important issue. Now, last time, like I say, I was talking about Steve Bannon's invitation to speak at the Oxford Union, which was a very controversial move by the union and attracted a big protest. And it was the protest that I was talking about in my previous video. This time, however, there is another protest planned for tomorrow's event. A different speaker, a right-wing politician called Marion Maréchal Le Pen, is invited to speak tomorrow at the union, and another protest has been organised. But it's not so much the protest that I've got a problem with.
Let me, man, it's such a small. The Oxford Union is enrolled in yet another debate about free speech after it invited fascist French politician Marcian, I don't know her name, but to speak next week. I can't read it. It's so small. Sorry, I'll look into her
with
real
at the
quick.
moment, because it hasn't happened yet. I don't know if it will result in the same kind of arrogance that the last protest did, with people actually blocking entrances, or whether it will just be a case of people voicing their dissent from this person's ideas, which I have no problem with, and in fact actively support the idea of that kind of protest. The thing that I want to speak about here is that because I'm from Oxford anyway, my local MP, my representative in Parliament, had something to say about this invitation, and I was less than impressed. So I've written to my MP, Annalise Dodds, before about the issue of faith schools. I mean, the letter was addressed to the Education Secretary, but I sent it to Annalise Dodds, and she sent it through, and I got a response, and it was very successful. I was very impressed with my MP. But some of the things that she said to the BBC about this invitation of Miss Maréchal Le Pen really did trouble me, and I'm struggling to see how I can continue my support for her as an MP if she doesn't address this quite urgently. So I've written a letter to her, and it's already been sent, but I told her that I was going to make it public as well. So that's what I'm doing here. I just wanted to read out the letter in a public format, and you can take it either as an insight into my kind of political ideas and the kinds of things that I'm doing to try to make sure that my local representative is representing me, or you can see it as a statement about free speech in general, which I'm trying to promote more of on this channel anyway. So without further ado, I'll just read the letter to you as sent to the MP, but do bear in mind that's the context. Somebody's been invited to speak in Oxford, and my MP, who is the MP for the constituency of Oxford East, has decided to say something about this invitation, and that's what I'm responding to here. Dear...
Okay, so real quick before we hear the letter, it said that was in the description. So I'm going to read the note from the description. Is this it? I think this is it. Okay. So to anyone who supports or even considers supporting my channel, no. Here. Okay. Read the wrong thing. Not long after the massive protest against Not long after the protest against Steve Bannon's talk at the Oxford Union, another protest has been organized to oppose the platforming of a right-wing French politician. Unfortunately, my local MP... Okay, no, that's just him. He said it was in the description. Did he leave it as a pinned comment, maybe? Where? He said it was in the description. Oh, okay. As a link. A link in the description. Okay, Oxford Union's latest disgrace stunt causes more outrage. So this is her and the comment from the MP. Okay. An Oxford MP has told the union to grow up and stop inviting racist after racist. A protest is planned for Tuesday when Miss Maréchal Le Pen, who is the niece of France's far-right leader Marine Le Pen, will speak at the union from 5 p.m. The 29-year-old rising star of the far right holds strong anti-Muslim views, is against same-sex marriage and abortion, and is seen as more religious and socially conservative than her aunt, who lost in the final round of the French presidential election against Emmanuel Macron. Oxford East MP Annalise Dodds has hammered the union for inviting a fascist speaker and wasting police resources. She said inviting Marie Martial Le Pen to the Oxford Union legitimates one of the new generations of fascists. She is known to be the far right, even with among the far right National Rally. The Oxford Union's pathetic courting of publicity by inviting racist after racist is deeply frustrating for local people. Our city is proud of its diversity, and yet the Oxford Union seems determined to threaten this. Interesting. Seems determined to threaten diversity by inviting a speaker. I mean, you can say that. Sure. It's interesting. Miss Dodds continued. There is also an utter waste of police resources that will be required. Oh, I think I messed that up. Okay, there we go. There's also an utter waste of police resources that will be required by her visit at a time when our hardworking local police officers are already having to cope with strained resources. I hope that those running the Oxford Union will grow up. In the meantime, they should cancel their invitation. Organizers of protests wrote on Facebook, fascist Marine Martial Le Pen has been invited to speak at the Oxford Union. The union has represented as repeatedly hosted far-right speakers, including Tommy Robinson, Nick Griffin, and Marion's aunt. The talk is members only and was only announced a few days before, giving Oxford students no opportunity to voice our strong opposition to a person who believes that Muslims can only be French if they follow Christian culture. I mean, I wonder what the context of that is, because there's a lot in Islam that I do find problematic. And so in a sense, I might agree with that statement. I don't know. She has also accused the Muslim community in France of being aligned with terrorist groups and has repeatedly defended a fellow National Rally member of parliament who refuses to Muslims as a treacherous third column. Let's show up and send a clear message that her and her views are not and will never be welcome in our city. In its event description, the Oxford Union wrote, Marine Martial was elected to France's National Assembly in 2012 at the age of 22 and has been tipped as a future leader of the Front Nation. So that's basically the statement. They may argue they have the right to keep inviting fascists to speak and legitimizing them, but speakers and students also have the right to boycott this trash institution, and they should at all costs. So, and then this is a little blurb on who Marcian is. So, Marcian Jeanne Caroline Martial. Wow. I'm totally butchering that, I'm sure. Le Pen, born, okay, I don't need to read that, is known at, from 2010 to 2018, is a French politician who has served as a member of the European Parliament since 2024. She's part of Parliament. Okay. She is part of the Le Pen family as granddaughter of National Front, renamed National Rally in 2018, founder Jean-Marie Le Pen, and niece of its later leader, Marine Le Pen. I am not too familiar with a lot of this political stuff, especially European politics, but very, very interesting to see. End of the story, she's very right-leaning, apparently, and a lot of people at Oxford don't like that because a lot of, things at Oxford are very left-leaning, which is to each his own. So very interesting to see that. So that's some context of what's going on. Looks like the MP said that Oxford keeps, supporting and platforming fascists, and they keep inviting racist after racist. So she's very angry about the fact that they're inviting these political leaders to speak on the issue. So this is Alex's response in terms of free expression and why he thinks that message was wrong.
Annalise Dodds, MP. It has been a year and a half since I last wrote you. You may remember an open letter I composed on the issue of state faith schools, suggesting that the government retract its plan to abolish the cap on the proportion of students that can be admitted as pupils on the basis of their faith alone. You were swiftly cooperative in forwarding my message to the relevant parliamentary undersecretary, and I was glad to see the plan was eventually abandoned. I was impressed by your willingness to help me as a constituent of Oxford East, and reassured to think that I had a representative in the Commons whom I could rely on. It is in part for this reason that I was so disappointed by your comments reported by the BBC 17th of January 2019, of course the links will be in the description here, regarding the Oxford Union's invitation of Marion Maréchal Le Pen to speak to its members on Tuesday.
Sorry about that, guys. I'll get to it in a second. This happens every once in a while.
The event may well have taken place, though perhaps if the Steve Bannon episode is... By the time you read this letter, the event may well have taken place to speak to its members on Tuesday.
There we go.
By the time you read this letter, the event may well have taken place, though perhaps if the Steve Bannon episode is anything to go by, only with a minority of would-be attendees actually able to get inside the chamber. And yet I hope that you do not therefore disregard the graveness of my concerns, which are not limited to the specificities of this event. In order to continue my support for you as an MP, I would need a response to some salient questions and requests. Firstly, since you referred to Miss Maréchal Le Pen as part of a, quote, new generation of fascists and as a, quote, racist, I must ask you to substantiate these claims with more than a passing reference to how she is, quote, known to be. I do not necessarily dispute your allegations, and they are in fact irrelevant to the most important of my concerns, but I'm beginning to tire of the annexation of indispensable terms like racist and fascist into the lexicon of those speakers and writers with mere concerns about right-wing views which I do not share but would never be so myopic as to call racist or fascistic without unequivocal proof. I'm confident that you would not make such a dangerous mistake, and thus I hope to hear from you with the references that corroborate your claims. Second, you assert, quote, our city is proud of its diversity, and yet...
I love that. What's the source? What's the source behind your claim? It's very journalistic. I love it.
The Oxford Union seems determined to threaten this, end quote. Though you do not specify which type of diversity you're talking about, I'm sure that you can't be referring to the most important of these, diversity of thought and opinion, since you feel that a private institution hosting a talk somehow poses a threat to it. My request here is twofold. I'd like to know how precisely you think this talk threatens the diversity of Oxford City, which you rightfully report that I, as both a local and a student, am proud of. And if it does, could you please tell me, which do you feel is more dangerous? Allowing controversial speakers to talk to an educated audience, or allowing the general public to be the arbiter of permissible speech? To me, the latter resembles mob rule and assumes the arrogance of infallibility. The former option is not a perfect solution, but nor does one exist. Could you please inform me of the level of your commitment to freedom of thought and expression, and how any amount of such a dedication can square with the views that you've expressed? Finally, and my principal reason for writing to you, I was absolutely dismayed by your reference to the, quote, utter waste of police resources that will be required by her visit. Can you think of a better use of public resources than the protection of free expression? Perhaps there may be a few, but to call the defense of the very principle that makes our country a free one an utter waste of police resources, I think is a mistake that verges on the severity of requiring a retraction. You, quote, hope that those running the Oxford Union will grow up, yet I can assure you that those who organise these events do not treat their responsibilities lightly, and in fact it seems to me that if anything is indicative of the abdication of the duty to defend diversity, it's not the Union's invitation of Miss Maréchal Le Pen, but the idea that to deploy police officers to protect this very principle is an utter waste of their time and money. I hope this letter finds you well and that you can elucidate your position on this crucial matter for those of your constituents who, like me, vote according to their principles. Sincerely yours, Alex J. O'Connor, St John's College, Oxford University. And to everybody else who's decided to give this letter a read or a listen, even though it doesn't directly affect them, I hope that you noticed that this actually does directly affect you, in the sense that although you may not be in Oxford and you may not be able to attend this speech or the protest against it, you're certainly affected by the principles of free speech that underlie my letter here, and I hope that you can get behind the message. If you don't, do leave a comment, let me know. Free speech is a very controversial issue, especially at Oxford here at the moment. The student newspapers are going crazy over it. I'd love to have as many arguments as possible to contribute to these, so if you have anything important to say, do put it in the description, the comments down below. But until I find the time to make another video, and hopefully a proper one, I've got a bunch of ideas lying around, but it's just about finding the time to put them together. So until that happens, thank you for listening, thank you for reading, or thank you for watching, whichever format you decided to take this letter in, and I hope to see you in the next one soon.
That's awesome. Super cool. Yeah, with it's so cool that he's, reaching out to Parliament, he's reaching out to his representatives in order to speak out about these sort of things, these blatant claims. I think too often we just have people who, will say something, and we'll read something online, or we'll watch a video and someone will make a claim. Or there's just this sort of slogan that people throw around all the time. And it's like, what are you talking about? Do you know what you're referring to? What's the source behind what you're saying? Where's the facts? Like, what are you actually pointing to when you're saying this thing? And too often do we let people just say whatever the hell they want, wherever the hell they want, publicly most of the time, and we're just okay with letting that happen, without checking sources, without checking for any of this important information that's going on. So no, that's really cool that he's doing that, especially I think he's like a college freshman at this point, something along those lines. I don't remember, but super cool to see that he's speaking out about that. So all right, well, we are now at 105 videos. 105. Woo, woo, woo. Okay, and together we have watched 14 videos. So I'm going to copy my handy dandy little template comment right over here. We are chugging along, guys. We are getting there. Give this video a like and subscribe. If you want to see me continue to react to every single Alex O'Connor video, if you want to see it, be here, subscribe. It's super, super cool. But in terms of the comment, I always like to get some inspiration, got to be inspired. But I think it is really, really cool to just see how he, is speaking out, in terms of this stuff. So let's see what people are saying. Love it. Nice logo. Oh man, that's going around, man. It's a growing movement, I guess. Alex, as a Patreon supporter, I can assure you that, had you chose to release this as a Patreon video, I would not have felt in any way shortchanged or ripped off. It speaks to, man, I can't read today. It speaks to the very high intellectual content of your videos, then even something done as a quick and dirty webcam upload is superior to the vast majority of content on YouTube. I appreciate how well you articulate something that I intuit but sometimes struggle to express to others, the idea that free speech is one of the most important things to defend, especially in these days of highly democratized, yet often highly censored speech. I became a Patreon because your wonderfully articulate defense of free speech. Please keep repeating yourself as often as needed. That's cool. Really, that's a really great sentiment. Definitely on the supporting side. So super cool to see that. The syllable to word ratio is strong with this one. That's a good one. I don't mean to pry, but how long did it take you to write this letter? It appears to be incredibly well researched and articulate. P.S. It's good to have you back. Yeah. So, I mean, he didn't post for quite a few months. It was January, and I believe the last one was in November. So it's 2 months since he had posted. So, yeah. When you tear out a man's tongue, you are proving him a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say. George R.R. Martin. Love George R.R. Martin. Yeah, I'll say it. Where's the wind's a winner, bro? Where's the wind's a winner? Come on. You know, it feels like you're pulling out your own tongue. But all right, we're done with that topic. Love George R.R. Martin. Love Game of Thrones. Honestly, he gets a lot of hate for that. So maybe I'll retract it. I retract what I just said. But the UK needs constitutional protection of free speech. The US needs to enforce it at universities. Does the UK not have constitutional support of free speech? What? That's crazy. Hold up. That is crazy. What? The UK does have constitutional protection of free speech, primarily through Human Rights Act of 1998. Okay, so they definitely had it at this point, which incorporates the European Convention on Human Rights. Article 10 of the ECHR specifically protects the right to freedom of expression, allowing individuals to hold opinions and receive the important information without inference by public authority. However, this right is not absolute. It is subject to certain limitations, such as restrictions on hate speech and incitement to violence, which are designated to protect public safety and the rights of others. Thus, free speech is legally protected. It is not unregulated right and can be restricted under specific circumstances. I am curious. I mean, they listed a couple, so I'm curious as to what those circumstances are, because the free speech in the U.S. also has certain limitations as well. So I'm wondering what what he's talking about. Technically, as a monarchy, I don't think it's possible to make a constitutional right just something that's widely expected. They do have a constitution, though, so it's not like a legitimate monarchy. Does not stop the codified constitution with a protection of right being created. Okay, that's just going to be a rabbit hole. So we don't need to listen to that. I think we leave our comment now. I've been inspired. By what though? That's a real question. I don't know what I'm going to leave as a comment yet. I'm thinking something along the lines of I think it's just admirable, that he's speaking out to his parliament. Welcome if you're just watching this channel or watching this live stream the first time. If you're unfamiliar, I am doing a series. This is episode 5 of me live streaming, reacting to every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. And so I appreciate you stopping by. But yeah, when it comes to like free speech, I think it's just admirable that he's out there advocating for free speech with his parliament. So I'm gonna leave a comment I think along those lines. Tough thing about this is I'm mostly schooled when it comes to like religion. When it comes to like politics, I know very little. I should be more informed. I wish I had spent more time, informing myself on these kind of issues. But, the fact is I'm just pretty ignorant when it comes to these kind of issues. But free speech, I think, is important to uphold. And it is something that we ought to. That's where moral philosophy comes in. Anyway, I was going to say something. Yeah. What was her name again? Her name. The PM. Her name was. That's not it. Wait, no, it wasn't. I'm dumb. The PM. Let's see. Let's see. What's her name though? Second Union Storm in 2 days. What's her name? This bit of behind the scenes, the boring part of the video. Trying to find her name, bro. Yeah, thanks for being here. For every bit of it. I need to find this name. If I can't find it in the next like 5 seconds, I won't include it. But is this it? Harris Jones. No, dude. No, that's so sad. I'm so sad. I don't know the name. I don't know. I'm sad. I'm very sad. I'm just gonna, leave a little comment here. And not include the name. I failed. It is super admirable to see you defend free speech, free expression. I remember watching your first letter. It was also well put, respectable, and all right, so I said, hey, Alex, this is Jackson from the Truth and Tradition podcast. I am on a mission to watch every one of your videos and leave a comment on each and every one of them. It is super admirable to see you defend free expression. I remember watching your first letter to your PM, and it was also well put, respectable, and inspiring. So cool to see this kind of care brought to the next letter. I hope this letter has the same kind of success as the first one. Thanks for all you do. Bada bing, bada boom, bada pow. All right, that brings us to another video finished. The last video, wait, did I already do this? I might have already counted it. I think I did, actually. I did already count it. Never mind. So far, as an update, we have watched 105 of Alex O'Connor's videos. Together, we have watched 14 videos. So this is on my own, 105. But having live streamed, we have watched 14 videos altogether. So we're chugging along, guys. We are getting there. We are getting to it. So the last two were about, free speech, free expression. They were also kind of older videos. But what I'm thinking is we watch one of his newer videos that just so happens to be on the same topic. Isn't that crazy? He has a very similar video currently that is on a very similar topic, free speech, free expression. So we are going to watch his video on the 10 philosophical books banned by the Catholic Church. Yay! We love it. We love it when the Catholic Church chooses to ban books. That's amazing. I love it when people choose to ban books. I love it when they burn books too. Like the Nazis, when you burn books. Isn't that just so great? I'm being sarcastic if you don't know. So that's what we are up to. That is the task up next for each and every one of us. We get to watch the 10 philosophical books banned by the Catholic Church. Jean-Paul Sartre, Nausea. That's the book that he has up there. So let's see what's behind all of this.
The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, or Index of Prohibited Books, was a list published by the Catholic Church banning certain texts which were too heretical and therefore just too dangerous to read. The first versions of this index appeared in the mid-16th century, but the most amazing thing about this index is that it was still publishing well into the second half of the 20th century, only being officially abolished in 1966. This means that Catholics who were alive when the Beatles were releasing albums were still officially prohibited from reading from what was now a list of thousands of banned texts. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, if you want...
I'm so curious, how do they enforce that? How do they enforce these certain texts from being banned? I don't know. I'm so curious.
A recommended reading list containing the greats of philosophy, of history, of fiction. Look no further than the Index Librorum Prohibitorum. Up first is Meditations on First Philosophy by René Descartes. Descartes is...
What? They banned that one? The I think, therefore I am? That's where that comes from. Oh my God. That's crazy. I can't
considered
believe
by many to be the founder of Western philosophy.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is...
He actually just did a podcast on that. I haven't watched that one yet, but it's a podcast basically talking about Descartes, the author of modern philosophy. Wow, that is crazy that was banned by the Catholic Church.
That he began to notice something strange about his beliefs. There were all kinds of things that Descartes believed about the world.
Meet Shark Cryoglow.
Sorry, y'all. These ads, bro, they're so annoying.
He believed that he had hands, for example, or that chairs existed, or that the sky was blue. But he began to realize that, at least in principle, he could be mistaken about a great number of these things. For example, the belief that he has hands. Well, he's got good evidence that he's got hands. He can see his hands, but how does he know that his sense data is accurate? How does he know that the external world exists at all? It certainly appears to, but...
I'm talking with myself muted. Oh, I'm sorry. I've done that twice so far in this video. My bad. Man, free speech, even myself, I'm trying to to ban my own free speech. Oh boy. But yeah, no, his entire thing is about the demon who is wanting to ban himself, ban and cause you to doubt anything. So crazy.
What if he's mistaken? In the modern world, you often hear people hypothesize that we live in a simulation, and this essentially captures the same thought. It might seem as though we're living in a real world of real objects, but what if it's all an illusion? What if you're just a brain in a vat somewhere and you're being prodded or fed electrical signals to give you the illusion of living in the real world? Now, to be clear, Descartes didn't think that this was the case. He didn't think the world was an illusion, but he realized he had no way to prove that it wasn't. He believed that the world was real, but how could he know that? Well, to find out, Descartes took everything that he could even possibly doubt and treated it as if it was false. And the question is, what are we left with? It's false that I have a body, it's false that the sky is blue, it's false that the earth exists. Is there anything that I'm just not capable of doubting. Famously, for Descartes, there was one such example, something which it was impossible for him to doubt. And that's that he exists in some form. Why? Well, because doubting is a kind of thinking. And so, as long as you're trying to doubt that you exist, you're doing some kind of thinking. But if you're thinking something, then there must be a you doing the thinking. So the very act of doubting, being a form of thinking, proves the existence of a thinker. And although he didn't word it like this in the Meditations, he previously captured this thought in first a French phrase, je pense donc je suis, then in Latin, cogito ergo sum, meaning I think, therefore I am. Now, this doesn't mean that I exist as a man with hands and feet and hair and a camera in front of me, but it means that I must exist in some form. Even if I am just a brain in a vat or being fooled in some kind of simulation, there must exist something that I can meaningfully call me that's doing the thinking. I've got a whole video on Descartes' I think, therefore I am. Lots of people have criticized this line of thought, but whether you agree with it or not, what's undeniable is that it's one of the most influential phrases and influential thoughts in the history of philosophy.
We haven't got to that one yet, so that'll be in the future, so key in. He's he's leaving comments on past videos we haven't even seen yet, so I guess that's a spoiler, so avert thine eyes.
And of course, it was banned by the Catholic Church. Descartes' radical doubt and rationalist philosophy wasn't super friendly to Catholic doctrine, but interestingly, Descartes was a believer in God, and in fact, the very next thing he does in the Meditations is tries to use the same kind of logic that he's just used to prove that he exists, to prove the existence of God. And Descartes' approach was a little bit controversial. He tries to prove the existence of God, but he does this as a means to ground his epistemology. He sort of uses God as this foundational tool upon which he can build a justification for knowing things, but once he's built that foundation, he kind of doesn't really need God anymore. And that's actually why Blaise Pascal, the famous 17th century thinker, wrote in his Pensées that he can never forgive Descartes. He writes, I cannot forgive Descartes. He would gladly have left God out of his whole philosophy, but he could not help making him give one flip to set the world in motion. After that, he had no more use for God. This is followed by a thought that simply reads, Descartes, useless and questionable. Of course, Catholics of Pascal's time wouldn't have known this, because the Pensées was also banned on the index. That's right, my second recommendation is Pascal's Pensées. Pensée just means thoughts. You can think of it as like a diary or a journal that Pascal kept. It's quite aphoristic. It consists in a list of sayings, essentially, that aren't always entirely connected to each other. It's split into two parts, man without God and man with God, and Pascal is one of the most important religious thinkers in Christian history. Pascal was also, of course, a celebrated mathematician and physicist, and is probably most remembered, I think quite unfortunately, for his
Pascal wager.
Famous wager, in which he said that if you're going to bet on theism or atheism, you should bet on theism because you've kind of just got less to lose. That wager is...
Yeah, I find that wager to be very problematic for several different reasons, especially, I mean, the most blatant reason is because there's so many different religions out there and they don't agree with each other. So if you choose to believe in God, right, you're still going to damn yourself to hell in a lot of different other religions. So the wager is still a risk. There's still a risk in choosing any faith. I mean, it's poetic. It's part of the idea that, you're choosing something. It's part of faith. It's a risky thing. Maybe you could say an atheism is the same thing, and agnosticism's, being cowardly. I don't know. I disagree with that personally, but yeah, no, Pascal's wager is definitely an interesting one, but one that I would firmly suggest that you do not use in any sort of Christian debate or religious debate.
It's derived from some of the writings in the Pensées, but the Pensées contains all kinds of really interesting nuggets of philosophical wisdom. In fact, one of my most viewed reels and YouTube shorts is me just talking about one of Pascal's ideas. So I've been recommending this for some time, and of course, all of the texts mentioned today will be linked in the description. Now,
yeah, that I actually watched that one. It was a debate regarding, I believe it was the debate on free will, whether free will exists. I think that's what it was. He's done several videos on that, but in that one he quotes a poem of Pascal, and so I guess it's from Pensées, and so many people were commenting and just like, I love how Alex just, casually, he just, he's talking in the conversation. He just casually quotes, I guess from Pascal's Ponce, a entire passage from it. Just casually, quotes it offhand. Probably didn't even prepare to quote it because it was just kind of an offhand sort of thing. But he's like, oh yeah, here's a huge paragraph of dialogue that I've for some reason decided to memorize, and here you go. And the funny thing that people were reacting to is like no one gave any response. The audience was dead silent. It was really funny, and it's like no one cares. Like what the hell? Like he just did that. Very impressive. It's like nope, no one cares. Get out of here with memorizing things. Very very suitable with the Catholic Church. Like get out of here with these books. They're banned. They're not still banned. But.
If I asked you to just think randomly of an idea or a person that's been censored by the Catholic Church at some point in its history, what would come to mind? Perhaps the most famous example of Catholic censorship is against heliocentrism, the idea that the Earth orbits the Sun rather than the other way around. Heliocentrism is usually first attributed to Nicholas Copernicus, who wrote about heliocentrism, but at a time when it certainly was far from proven science. And his seminal text, On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres, was written before there really was an index of banned books that the Catholic Church was publishing. And so at the time of its writing, and even for
we understand that when it comes to the market of VMware alternatives, there are multiple options.
There we go.
Decades and decades after its publication, it wasn't really an issue for the Catholic Church and didn't make an appearance on the index. However, in the year 1610, a man called Galileo Galilei published a text called Starry Messenger, which used some recent observations in astronomy that he'd made to advocate for the Copernican view of the heliocentric solar system. But in 1616, the Catholic Inquisition officially told Galileo that he was not allowed to write about heliocentrism. Now, it is worth pointing out that although, of course, Galileo was eventually vindicated by history, even in his time, heliocentrism was far from established science, and so the Catholic Church were not out of step with the general scientific consensus in being suspicious of what he was saying. Robin Vos has a wonderful book chronicling the history of the index called The Index of Prohibited Books, and he puts it well when he says, censors working in the 17th century followed what they believed to be the best scientific consensus of their day, and sought to suppress what they considered junk science that could be harmful to society.
That's a very good point. This reminds me of something I've been researching lately, which is the Shroud of Turin. And in the 14th century, when the Shroud first shows up, a lot of people, skeptics mostly, I'm a skeptic of it too, but we point out this idea that the person who first was shown to have possession of the Shroud of Turin, Geoffrey de Charny, I think it might be Geoffrey de Charny. He's this sort of knight who's presenting the Shroud of Turin to people, and the bishop at the time, Henry de Poitiers, it's in France. He's the person that shows up, and he's like, hey, look, we need to stop this thing from being shown. We need to stop it from being shown to people publicly and, collecting all money for pilgrims who decide to come in and visit the Shroud of Turin, because it's not the authentic burial cloth of Jesus, right? It's not that. It's not authentic. And the reason he points to is, well, the person who made it. I've investigated them. I've seen them. And they showed me their technique. They showed me that they painted it onto the cloth. Well, we do know that the Shroud of Turin was not painted, right? We've scientifically looked at it, and yes, we have found red ochre paint on the cloth on the Shroud of Turin. But the interesting thing about it is that seems to be a touch-up of some of the blood that's already there, because there's actual blood that's on the Shroud of Turin as well as red ochre sort of on top of it. And the red ochre, that's one theory. There's other theories about how the red ochre got on there. But generally, I still reject the Shroud of Turin. But I think it's interesting that the first theory, disregarding it, is actually false. It's not painted. And so the suggestion that it was painted is definitely an interesting one. So Alex was on a podcast, and he was having them pull up Bible verses, and he had them all. Yes, dude, I remember that. That was, that was when he was talking about Wes Huff and some of the things that Wes Huff had been saying that was false or incorrect. Dude, his brain is just insane. He just kind of remembers these sort of things. Yeah, very impressive, very impressive. So, but yeah, with the Shroud of Turin, what I found very interesting in regards to this is, while I would agree that, yeah, it's false, it's not true, and I would agree with what the Catholic Church is trying to say there, that, you know, we shouldn't be showing this and we shouldn't be collecting money to show to pilgrims, the Shroud of Turin. While I agree with that, I also disagree with the method in which they decided to shut it down. They decided to ban it. You know, maybe they should have just said, we don't know where this came from. We can't know where this came from. And so we are not going to show this and collect money as if it's authentic, because that's just wrong. That seems immoral, especially for people who are traveling long distances just to see the Shroud of Turin. That's expecting a lot out of people. So I find it very interesting that it's a very similar sentiment to what's going on here.
Points out that while we might condemn their decision today, we have to at least understand the context in which they were working to issue a judgment. It might still very well have been the wrong thing to do. I think that it was, but it's not like this was proven science that the church was proactively trying to suppress. So Galileo was silenced, at least for a decade or so. In 1632, his former friend had been elected as the new pope, Pope Urban VIII, and although he had been warned not to write about heliocentrism, he had spoken to the pope, his former friend, and seemed to be under the impression that as long as he wrote about it in a hypothetical manner, it wouldn't be a problem. This led to Galileo publishing his Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, which consisted of a dialogue between different characters who were discussing and debating the structure of the solar system. And although this was a dialogue, some of the characters seemed to be a bit more intelligent than some of the others. In fact, the main character defending heliocentrism, Salviati, which shares an etymological root with saved or salvation, would debate against a character called Simplicio. So the next year, the Catholics officially condemned Galileo and sentenced him to house arrest for the remainder of his life, saying in the sentence,
I'm curious, what does Simplicio mean in Latin? I think if, according to his suggestion, it seems like simple, but I probably butchered that spelling. This happens every once in a while. It's kind of annoying. Latin meaning. Simplicio. The name Simplicio is of Latin origin, derived from the Latin word simplicius, which means simple or uncomplicated. Okay, yeah, so it's basically what he said. I just wanted to fact check him. Very interesting.
The proposition that the sun is the center of the world and does not move from its place is absurd and false philosophically and formally heretical because it is expressly contrary to Holy Scripture. It was also at this point, by the way, that, remember Copernicus's book that no one really cared about?
Nope, I don't remember.
This course is about machine learning, modeling.
There we go.
Now it became a problem, so it was placed on the index pending corrections, and it could only be taken off again if the text was edited to only speak hypothetically and mathematically about the Earth orbiting the Sun and have any insinuation that it actually orbits the Sun removed. Again, for the time, not an unreasonable thing to think, but it's the confidence with which the Church condemned his views as absurd and false and contrary to religious scripture that has led history to look back with such embarrassment on this incident. In fact, in 1835, Galileo's dialogue was removed from the index as it was beginning to become clear that, yeah, the Earth does actually orbit the Sun. Something which, by the way, the Catholic Church did eventually, to its credit, admit that heliocentrism is true and it was a mistake to condemn Galileo.
Wow. That's actually very similar to what happened to Charles Darwin, except in reverse. Because Darwin, he sort of has this sentiment at the end of Origin of Species, basically talking about how there's like beauty in the fact that we all come from the same source, that we all come from the same sort of original species, which is a single cell organism. He finds beauty in that, but he doesn't ever reference it to God. And so a lot of people were very frustrated by that. They get very angry. And so in his second edition of Origin of Species, he adds this line about God having, it's beautiful that God sort of orchestrated it. I'm going to pull up the quote on it real quick. I'll keep playing the video, but it's very similar to that, where, it's like, oh yeah, you can publish about heliocentrism, but as long as you say this is just an idea, it's not like fact, it's like, come on guys, like, let's not silence people.
In 1992. It was a slow burner, heliocentrism in the church, but eventually they got there. But today, ladies and gentlemen, I don't just have recommendations for your intellectual diet. I have recommendations for your physical diet too. If you're anything like me, you find it quite difficult to stay on top of your nutrition, especially getting all of the necessary vitamins and minerals and things like that. Especially if I'm short on time because I'm busy or I'm traveling or something. Today's sponsor, Huel, has come to the rescue a number of times for me. Spelled Huel, Huel's Black Edition is a complete meal, so it will leave you feeling full, but also focused and ready for the day. It's affordable, and with just a tiny bit of prep in its powdered form, just shake it up in a shaker like this, and you can grab and go. But it even also comes in pre-prepared form. 400 calories, 26 vitamins and minerals that you need to thrive, all inside of this bottle. As you can see, I like the classic chocolate flavor, but it also comes in chocolate peanut butter or vanilla or iced latte. There are all kinds of different flavors. So whatever you like, it also tastes great. And it's a full meal inside of this shaker with over 40 grams of...
Yes, we do watch his sponsored ads. Go get some Huel for yourself. It's part of this. We have to watch every second of every video. It's important.
Protein, and working out at less than $3 per meal, it's incredibly budget friendly. I've actually really liked Huel for quite a long time now, so I'm genuinely excited that they're sponsoring the channel. If you go to Huel.com and use the code AlexO'Connor, new customers can get 15% off. The link is in the description with terms and conditions, but yeah, 15% off for new customers at Huel.com using the code AlexO'Connor. Try it out, complete nutrition, easy as it gets. Let's get back to it. It is worth...
Okay, I wanted to read that quote, though, from Darwin. So he says at the end of Origin of Species, he says right here, to conclude, therefore, let no man out of weak conceit or sobriety or in ill applied moderation think or maintain that a man can search too far or be too well studied in the book of God's word or in the book of God's works, divinity or philosophy, but rather let men endeavor in endless progress or proficiency in both. That was not right. Sorry. This is the one. Okay, I'm sorry. I just read the wrong quote. Ignore what I just said. There is grandeur in this. What the heck? Okay, I'm going to pull this over. Annoying. Sorry, y'all. This is the quote. At the end of Origin of Species, he says, there is grandeur in this natural selection view of life, with several powers having been originally breathed by the Creator into a few forms or into one, and that, whistle this planet, has gone cycling in according to the fixed law of gravity from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved. It's a really cool sentiment. But the idea about the Creator was not in the original edition. It was not in the first edition, but it was added because people were angry with his conclusion at the in Origin of Species. So it's interesting to see, even the politics back then were very stringent on this issue.
Pointing out that authors who found themselves on the index of banned books didn't always receive the same kind of punishment or censorship. And this doesn't just have to do with the kind of text that was being censored, but also when and by whom. There were different versions of prohibition indexes. There was a Roman index and a Spanish index and a French index, and They didn't always agree with each other, but also these indexes were published over centuries, so the consequences an author might face would depend on when they were writing. So when the 16th century Italian philosopher Giordano Bruno was writing that the universe was probably infinite and that stars might be suns of their own, even maybe with their own planets and potentially having life on those planets, he had his works banned, and was also burned at the stake. Later, the works of Copernicus and Galileo were banned, but Copernicus's work was only banned after he died, and Galileo only ever suffered house arrest. Fast forward to the end of the 18th century, and a Scottish philosopher has written a text which would revolutionize economics and bring new ideas to the table about how it is that nations gain wealth. For 15 years, this book wasn't even known to Catholic inquisitors, but in 1791, a French translation of it was found in a Spanish bookshop, and suddenly, the Catholics took an interest. This French translation of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, now a foundational text in the study of economics, was subsequently condemned by 3 inquisitors, and nearly 100 years later, finally added to the Spanish Index of Prohibited Books. And as again Robin Vos points out in his wonderful book, this initial condemnation of the Wealth of Nations in 1792 didn't prevent a Spanish translation from emerging in 1794. Readers pointed out that the Catholic condemnation had technically only applied to the French translation, so a Spanish translation shouldn't, officially speaking, be a problem. Say what you like about the logic of a move like this, but it does at least demonstrate the waning of the practical power of the Spanish Inquisition by the end of the 18th century. In fact, when the Wealth of Nations was finally officially added to the Spanish Index in 1873, the Spanish Inquisition didn't exist anymore, having disbanded in 1834. So, in adding this next book, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, to our list, I hope to also demonstrate that the kinds of consequences authors could face from Catholic censorship would depend on the time, place, and reason for the censorship. Okay, next we're going to look...
That is crazy. That is so crazy. Speaking of time, place, and context, as well as the fact that, you know, he was burned at the stake for what he did. Something that we have recently discovered. He mentioned in some of the things he was talking about with that book was that there's potentially life on other planets. Well, some of the craziest new research. NASA has shown that there's evidence of life that was on Mars. Right? There's evidence that there was life on Mars. We don't know how long ago, but many, many, many years ago. And it's pretty crazy. This is pretty new. We could be one step closer to proving aliens exist. In 1996, a group of NASA scientists made a stunning announcement, the discovery of what appeared to be bacterial fossils on Mars. President Bill Clinton discussed the discovery on camera, and people celebrated the apparent answer to the age-old question of whether we're alone in the universe. Within a few years, further scientific scrutiny revealed the so-called fossils could be explained by abionic, non-life processes. Nearly 30 years later, we're still not sure if life ever existed on Mars, but that might be poised to change. NASA's Perseverance Mars rover, Perseverance? That must be the name of the rover, may have already sampled some Martian fossils according to a September 10th, 2025 study published in the journal Nature. Excited as it might be, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and it doesn't get much more extraordinary than aliens. Yes, I love to see that. That's a good quote. I forget who initially coined that. It might have been Hitchens, not sure. NASA's Perseverance rover discovered Lyord spots on a reddish rock. So that's what we got here. These little spots right here. Those are what they're referring to on that rock. In July 2024, scientists think the spots may indicate that billions of years ago, the chemical reactions in this rock could have supported microbial life. Other explanations are being considered. So we haven't figured it out fully, right? But this might be our first evidence of life on another planet, historically. Very, very interesting. So the fact that there's life on other planets is not absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that that man was burned at the stake for such ideas is fascinating. Very fascinating. Very sad. Very sad.
At another Scottish philosopher, probably more famous than the former, and that's David Hume. And in this case, I can't really recommend a particular text, because all of his works were banned on the index. Hume was famously an empiricist, meaning he thought that all knowledge is derived from observations of the natural world, that knowledge can't come from anywhere else. I made a whole video.
Yes, this video, you guys should definitely check out this video that he did on David Hume, because it talked about like wine. It's probably one of his more famous kind of viewed videos, but it talked about how ChatGPT can't produce a glass of wine that's full. It can't produce a full glass. This isn't a wine glass, but pretend this is a wine glass. It can't produce a full wine glass of wine. All it can do is just partially filled wine glasses, which is fascinating, you know, because it's a language learning model. It's fed a lot of information, and based on that, it works with what it has, which has some philosophical, interesting takes. An empiricism, which he'll explain in a moment, which kind of makes sense with the idea of what we're talking about with the wine glass. Wine glass, like pictures of a wine glass that it produces can only be made from what information it's been given. Well, generally, you don't fill a wine glass full. Instead, you fill it half or maybe 3/4 or what have you. But it can't produce a wine glass that is full. And so the idea behind his video is to point that out and to say, hey, maybe we can't learn anything that hasn't already been fed to us prior. Like our information has to be connecting things we've already experienced and seen and learned from the world. They can't be like totally new things. And that basically anything that we learn or anything that we sort of understand about the world has to be from something prior to it, according to David Hume. And that kind of matches what ChatGPT is showing. So definitely an interesting video. Y'all should definitely check that one out. Crazy.
About Hume's empiricism. Actually, it's about ChatGPT and how that relates to his empiricism, but I explain it there, so take a look if you're interested. But Hume's empiricism led him to some unusual conclusions. Most famous, perhaps, is his so-called problem of induction. Induction is a kind of reasoning that we employ every single day. It's the kind of reasoning in which a conclusion doesn't necessarily follow from premises, but we draw a conclusion anyway. This is opposed to deductive reasoning, where the conclusion does follow from the premises. So an example of deductive reasoning might be premise 1, all men are mortal. Premise 2, Socrates is a man. Conclusion, Socrates is mortal. An inductive argument might be something like this. How do you know that the sun will rise tomorrow, that day will follow the night? Well, because it happened yesterday. And it happened the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that, and it seems as though the laws of physics will keep working. That's what's always happened in the past. This doesn't guarantee the conclusion, logically speaking. The conclusion, the sun will rise tomorrow, seems like a reasonable move to make, but it's not actually guaranteed by these premises that it's risen in the past. And this is the nature of induction. It's reasoning from things that we have observed to things that we haven't observed. And most commonly this occurs when we reason from things that happened in the past, like the sun rising in the past, to things that happen in the future, like the sun rising tomorrow. This kind of thinking, this induction, is embedded in so much of what we do every single day. Not to mention the fact that it's also the basis of the scientific method, for example. But when Hume tries to find a justification for inductive reasoning, he comes up short. Hume believes in induction. He believes that the sun will rise tomorrow and that the laws of physics won't stop working in 5 minutes, and that if I drink a glass of water, it won't suddenly have inexplicably become poisonous to me or something. But when he tries to justify how he can know any of this, he runs into some difficulty. This problem of induction is probably too complicated to get into now, but it leads to this interesting skeptical scenario that we have no way to justify our inductive reasoning. And Hume is also suspicious of the concept of causation. If I roll one billiard ball into another one, the second one will move in the same direction. But why? Well, it seems like the first ball causes the second ball to move. But Hume, being an empiricist, tries to find the basis for this causal connection. He looks in the first ball, There's no causal guarantee. He looks in the second ball, he looks in the air between them, he looks everywhere he can, and he doesn't find any empirical basis for justifying this crucial and fundamental principle of cause and effect. If you're interested in why, then he writes about this in his Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. He wrote about it before, but in a much lengthier text, so I would probably start there. But Hume also wrote a work called Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, where he considers various arguments for the existence of God. For example, the argument from design features prominently in the conversation between the three main characters. And Hume has these characters represent different opinions, and it seems like Philo, who's a bit of an empirical skeptic, probably represents Hume's own view. So this text contains criticisms of religious arguments. For example, the universe is compared to a house. A house is complex and seems to be designed, and it does have some kind of intelligent designer. The universe seems similar. It's complex, it's made up of matter, it seems to require a similar kind of designer. But Philo points out that this isn't a great analogy because it's not like you've got the house over here and the universe over here. The house is a part of the universe. It's inside of it. So maybe that's an unfair analogy to draw. And the text basically contains a lot of back and forth on this kind of stuff. But as you can imagine, this doesn't really jibe well with the certainty of Catholic dogma. And so this, along with every other work that David Hume ever wrote, found its way onto the index. Another foundational figure for modern philosophy, at least, is Jeremy Bentham, a name you might recognize as the founder, so to speak, of the school of utilitarianism. Bentham believed that the basis of ethics is in securing the greatest good for the greatest number. And good he identified with utility. And what's the most utile thing for us? Pleasure. So for a utilitarian, the maximization of pleasure and the minimization of suffering is the basis of ethics. Utilitarianism is a popular but controversial idea that has birthed an unholy number of philosophical thought experiments, but relevant here is the fact that this kind of rationalist, mathematical, pleasure-based ethics is not in line with Catholic theology. And so, deontology, or the science of morality, written in 1834, found its way 1 year later onto the index. Interestingly, John Stuart Mill, often thought of as a kind of successor to Bentham, updating utilitarianism and defending it against some of its critics, does find his way onto the list, but it's not his work on utilitarianism or his perhaps more famous On Liberty. Instead, it's his Principles of Political Economy and that work alone which found its way onto the index. So, something of an honourable mention. Next up, we need to talk about political power. If there's one thing that the Catholic Church cared about most during the height of its inquisitorial scheming, it's power. Someone else who was thinking a lot about power in the 17th century was the political philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes lived through the English Civil War, a bloody battle between the royalists who supported the rule of King Charles I and the parliamentarians who opposed it and whose most famous advocate was Oliver Cromwell. Hobbes himself was a royalist and fearing for his safety, in 1640 he fled to Paris. While he was there, King Charles I was executed by the parliamentarians. And this horrified Hobbes, not just because he was a royalist, but because of the anarchy that this represented. The idea that if you just decide, I don't like that leader anymore, and somebody else disagrees, this can lead to bloody civil war. And so, 2 years later, Hobbes published his famous Leviathan, a philosophical work defending absolute submission to an absolute sovereign. Hobbes gives an account of why it is that authority evolves in the first place. In his view, life before society, man in the so-called state of nature, was, as he famously put it, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And in short, the best way that we could find to protect against this state of nature is to institute authority. And today, the same remains the case. The only way, according to Hobbes, of avoiding the kind of calamity that we witnessed with the English Civil War is via a social contract that binds us to absolute submission to some kind of sovereign ruler. Now, absolute and unwavering submission might sound quite attractive to an institution like the Catholic Church, but Hobbes also thought that this sovereign ruler of a nation should be able to dictate religious affairs. Hobbes had his own religious views, but he thought that if the sovereign wanted something else for his nation, that's what the sovereign will get. He would submit to this ruler who demanded of him a different kind of religious practice. So yeah, giving a human ruler an unlimited and pre-approved ability to dictate religious affairs is not particularly friendly to Catholic doctrine. Thus, Leviathan, along with, again, all of Thomas Hobbes' published works, found their way onto the index, although not actually until 1703, which is some 50 years or so after the Leviathan was originally published. Another philosopher famous for discussing the so-called state of nature is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau had a much more optimistic view of human nature. Unlike Hobbes, he believed that living in the state of nature, humans were essentially cooperative and living peacefully. It's modern society enforcing its own laws and rules on people which enslaves them. Thus, if you open Rousseau's Social Contract, published in 1762, you'll find the famous first words, "Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains." For Rousseau, the way to organize society is in accordance with what he called the general will, a slightly more democratic view than Hobbes's that we should just submit to an authoritarian dictator. Rousseau's idea is itself controversial. Those who don't agree with the general will of society will be forced to follow it anyway, and in his words, thereby forced to be free, but at any rate, it's another foundational text in political philosophy, and of course was banned by the Catholic Church in 1763. Interestingly, that was a year after the text was published, and in the same year it was published, the Parliament of Paris, which was France's sovereign court at the time, ordered a previous work, Emile, as well as the Social Contract, to be burned, and threatened him with arrest such that he fled to Geneva, where they also burned the books, and so he had to flee again. So it upset quite a few institutions, it seems. Okay, before we get to number 10, I'm just going to...
That's crazy. So many book burnings over time in history, and it's sad because a lot of the time the books that are being burned or books that are being banned are probably the books that are healthy for the society to challenge them in some sense. Not every book that's been banned or burned or what have you is good. I think there's probably a lot of books that are going to be rough and going to cause a lot of damage. But the question is, like, should we be banning them? Should we be burning them? And, of course, we live in a modern society that, is very much so pro-free speech. And I'm pro-free speech. I question how much of that is because of my growing up. I don't know. But I do find it to be an interesting idea that so much of this is based on authority and power. Now I'm talking like a social justice person, but I mean, it kind of is. Like, a lot of this does boil down to, power. So I don't know. Let's see number 10, what he has to say.
List some honorable mentions here. Voltaire's Candide, added in 1759. Interestingly, Voltaire, hearing that Jean-Jacques Rousseau had to flee Geneva, offered to take Rousseau into his own home and give him refuge, although this is something Rousseau didn't take him up on. Machiavelli's The Prince was added in 1559. John Milton, a fierce critic of Catholicism, found his magnum opus, Paradise Lost, added to the index in 1694. Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Added in 1783, this was notoriously harsh towards Christianity and blamed it in part for the weakening of Rome, which is one of the reasons why the empire would ultimately come to an end. Victor Hugo, who you may recognize as the author of Les Miserables and of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, found both of those novels added to the index in the 1800s. But in fairness, they were eventually taken off the list of prohibited books in 1959. Simone de Beauvoir.
1959. Yeah, it's crazy. At the beginning of the video, he mentioned that a lot, like the Beatles were a band at the time, by the time this list was finally taken off. So that would have been after 59, sometime in the 60s, I would assume. So I don't know. That is crazy.
Beauvoir also found her way onto the list with The Second Sex, a foundational text in second-wave feminism. Let it not be said that the Catholic Church is not, in at least some contexts, inclusive. Her life partner, not husband, she wasn't a big fan of marriage, as you can read about in The Second Sex, Jean-Paul Sartre also found his way onto the list with Nausea, Being and Nothingness, and his Roads to Freedom trilogy, all being deemed just too dangerous to read. Finally, at number 10...
Nausea's the one that was on the thumbnail. That was by... Who was it by?
Freedom trilogy, all being deemed... Nausea, Being Sex, Jean-Paul Sartre.
Jean-Paul Sartre. So he's the one that wrote the book on the thumbnail.
Also found his way onto the list with Nausea, Being and Nothingness, and his Roads to Freedom trilogy.
Being a nothingness. I'm so curious as to what that is. That sounds kind of like a cool concept. I'm reading too much into a title, but it sounds interesting.
All being deemed just too dangerous to read. Finally, at number 10, we have Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Immanuel Kant is widely considered to be one of the most important philosophers who ever lived. The Critique of Pure Reason called for what Kant compared to a Copernican revolution in our understanding of the way that we relate to the world around us. He attempted to ground morality and aesthetics in reason. He founded the philosophical system of transcendental idealism, which describes space and time as human intuitions which don't exist outside of our own perception. He tries to revolutionize our understanding of the world around us. Objects can never be known in and of themselves. We can never have direct interaction with or knowledge of objects like this microphone because all of it is filtered through our senses and the way that our mind constructs our experiences. I don't know much about Immanuel Kant, as is probably obvious from my rather botched attempt at summarizing his important contributions to philosophy, but one thing I do know about the man is that he's one of the most important thinkers that history has ever known. And so, of course, he makes for a wonderful rounding off point for today's list of recommended authors banned by the Catholic Church. Happy reading.
I love it. I love it. Oh, I accidentally clicked the next video.
The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, or
All right. Wow. So that was 10 philosophical books banned by the Catholic Church. Welcome everybody. If you're new, we're getting close to the end of this, but we have watched 4 videos so far in this live stream, so I'm going to mark that off. Currently, I am now at 106 videos that I've watched, and altogether, we have watched 15 videos through these live streams. So give yourself a pat on the back. Good job. And make sure to give this video a like and subscribe as I'm on this journey of watching every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. And that is no lie. We are here every single, usually it's every Tuesday at 7:30 Central Standard Time. This week it's Thursday because, well, I was censored. I was not censored, no. But I just had to work late. But anyway, banned books. I think it was very interesting to hear a lot of that stuff. A lot of it had to do with basically the Catholic Church not being comfortable with a lot of new ideas, a lot of new science. Heliocentrism was a huge part of that one. I think it's crazy that, Descartes, book was banned as well. I know a lot of religious people that use I think therefore I am and so many arguments in order to basically say, hey, look, you can't fully justify anything, and so you might as well believe in God. It's kind of a botched version of the argument, but there you go, to each his own. But I think it's so interesting that heliocentrism, an idea that we all accept to this day, that the earth revolves around the sun, that idea was banned by the Catholic Church. Shouldn't be surprising, but in a sense it still is. What are people saying? It's too late. I've already depicted you as a foolish Simplicio and myself as the noble and the intelligent Salviati. It's over. I probably butchered the Latin there, but I love it. I had to look up what simplicity. I didn't know any of that stuff, so I think therefore I am banned. Oh, that's such a good one. Oh man, I'm sad I didn't think of that. That's very good. So I'm gonna copy our little comment here. Copy, and paste. Now, in terms of what to write, I love thinking about how Galileo was told to only speak hypothetically about heliocentrism. And so he was like, no problem, I got you, fam, and wrote a text with one guy basically named God Agrees With Me, arguing for heliocentrism, and other guy basically named Dumbass, arguing for geocentrism. Galileo was a master of subtlety. I love that. That deserves a good old thumbs up. If y'all haven't read any of these books, I haven't read really any of these except for Descartes. So yeah, I think we should all check out some of these books. What to write? I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? What stuck out to you guys? I'm thinking something either along the lines of like just the idea that, you know, maybe just that this was on brand with the today's, I guess, video discussion. I don't know. I'm tired. I'm not being very clever right now. I'm just gonna say something. I should think about what stuck out to me in the video. You talked about Kant, David Hume, Adam Smith. It was Galileo. Let me watch the part on Galileo real quick.
From its place is absurd and false philosophically and formally heretical because it is expressly contrary to Holy Scripture. It was also at this point, by the way, that, remember Copernicus's book that no one really cared about? Now it became a problem. So it was placed on the index pending corrections, and it could only be taken off again if the text was edited to only speak hypothetically and mathematically about the Earth orbiting the Sun and have...
I got it. Hypothetically, we're gonna stick with that. Let me cook. Here we go. Okay. Okay. I'm going to proofread that real quick. So what I said is, hypothetically, these 10 books were banned by the Catholic Church. We must not make claims, Alex. Or at least the Catholic Church's grasp of the fabric of reality will fall apart. That's why only hypothetically I think it's plausible the earth revolves around the sun. We must be careful with our speech. I mean, come on. LOL, I was live streaming this week reacting to your content, and it's awesome that one of your newer videos covers the topic of free speech / expression. I am up to the part in your videos when you wrote to your MP regarding Marion Jean Caroline Marciella speaking at Oxford. It's great to see that you're still upholding free speech today. All right. I think that's a fair comment. I think we will go ahead and leave it. Bada bing, bada boom. So cool. Yeah, it was actually pretty cool to see that, he's still upholding free speech, and he's still telling us, check out these banned books by the Catholic Church. So yeah, Meditations on First Philosophy. That's a really good book right there. Highly recommend. But I will have to check out some of these other stuff. So it'll be cool to do so. But anyway, we are currently at 106 videos watched and 15 videos watched together. So good job. Give yourself a hand clap for those of you who stuck around, who are watching this all the way through, both live and afterward. Hey, good job. Good on you. Proud of you. I'm proud of you. And let's just keep chugging along. Let's keep it going. We will not be silenced. Anyway, that is all I think for tonight. This has been me, Jackson, the host of the Truth and Tradition podcast. I am very excited to continue this. Hopefully next Tuesday it should still work. I don't think anything should get in the way, but I will keep you updated if I need to change the time as I did this week. So I wish all of you a very wonderful rest of your week, and have a great day. God bless, as always. Bye now.